Hi, this is Emma, and I'm here today to talk to you about working with contributors, which is obviously really important when you are working with people who are connected to your organization because some of them may be vulnerable. And it's important that we just have some really clear guidance for you of how you can best work with people. So, in this session, we're going to be going through some interview techniques. So, we're going to go through some demonstrations. We're going to talk about how to build rapport with people that you're working with, some active listening exercises, how to manage some emotional moments that might come out when you're interviewing people, especially about something that's sensitive. We'll do a little bit of do's and don'ts in role play, and then we'll go through some troubleshooting of common situations. So to start with, when you're interviewing people that could be vulnerable or just anybody really, it's really important that you do plan in advance, and that you do let the person know that you're going to be interviewing them. If you just rock up and say to someone, "Oh, can I ask you some questions?" And shove your phone in their face, it's likely that they will be taken off guard, and they are probably going to be like, "No, no thanks, no thanks." So it is important that you prepare them beforehand and that you also prepare your questions, which will obviously help with part of the planning that we've already talked about in terms of your key messaging. But build a bit of a relationship with them, say to them beforehand, could you help us? We're going to be doing this project. This is what we want to achieve with it. And it'd be great if we could record you speaking about that or telling your story or speaking about your experiences. So it's important that you do speak to them beforehand and let them know, we want to interview them. And give them an idea of what the questions will be, but it's best not to tell them exactly what the questions will be, because when you do that, people tend to get a bit that people get nervous. They rehearse their answers, and then when they are actually answering the questions, they're not very authentic, and that it's not as good as if it's just a natural conversation. So prepare them beforehand, give people an overview of what it is that it is you're speaking about. When you're interviewing them, it's always really important that you have your phone at eye level. So what I would do is I'd have my phone like this, and I would kind of be next to the person here on the side, so that they're kind of looking at me rather than at the camera, unless you're doing something which is like direct and you want them to record something really important and direct to the camera, looking down the lens, like give today, donate, volunteer today. Then if you're interviewing someone, it's better to have the camera sort of here and you're off to the side of it and at their eye level. So then they're just looking at you and talking, and you can engage in them. It's more natural, it feels more personal. And you can say to them, this is just a conversation between me and you. Don't worry about the camera too much. Just look at me and we'll go through this together. We can always do it again. Don't worry about it too much. If you say something that you then don't want to be used, we can take that out. And I would always say, this film's only going to be a minute long and I'm interviewing you for 20. So if that gives you an idea of, it doesn't matter if you repeat things, or we're only going to be taking little snippets out of it. So yeah, make sure the positioning's right, that you've planned it in advance, and then that when you're asking people questions, you ask open-ended questions. So if you said to someone, "Did you have a good time?" They're just probably going to say yes or no, or "Oh, it was great." But actually try and give them sort of open questions that encourage conversation and allow them to elaborate. So, instead of saying, "Did you have a good time?" Say, "What stood out for you?" Or what have you enjoyed most about today? Also, it's great just leaving a bit of space after a question so that then they can, people like to fill that space. So what I might do is say, "What did you enjoy about today?" Their answer. And then instead of going straight into another question, I'll sort of leave a little bit of space, and then that person will go, "Oh, because, we don't normally get to do that sort of stuff." And then that's when people will start opening up a little bit more. And you can also do a lot of visual questions as well. So you might say, tell me about that. If I was a fly on the wall at that time of your life, what would I have seen? And that really helps people relax and kind of think more visually than just trying to think of the right answer. So yeah, it's worth adding those in as well. And then just really important to help with the edit is to repeat the questions and the answers. So if you say, what did you have for breakfast? And someone answers sausages. If when you're in the edit, all they'll get is the word sausages. But if you say to them, right, I'm going to ask you a question, it'd be great if you could just repeat the end of the question at the start of your answer. So, what did you have for breakfast today? Today for breakfast, I had sausages. And, like, what do you love about volunteering? here. Get them to say, what I love about volunteering here is, so you're getting them to repeat the end of the question at the beginning of their answer. And trust me, it will just help you so much when it comes to your edit. Here's a little demonstration that you can do. So it might feel a bit awkward to do this sort of stuff, but it's really good to just get in the practice. So, grab 10 minutes of your day, go and speak to a colleague. Even if you're not filming it, just get into the practice of doing this and asking them, why is this work important to you? This work is important to me because, so this important is this, so your work is important to you. Can you tell me why that is? Or can you tell me how that makes you feel? Or, if I'd have been a fly on the wall at the time when you had a difficult time at work, what would I have seen? So yeah, just get into the habit of trying to like reframe your questions. And yeah, it might feel awkward, but you will get such better responses, and your editing as well. Just make a better film when you get into this habit of asking questions in this way. So yeah, this is a film. This kind of an example of what makes a good interview. And this is a film that we worked on with a organization called the Bike Project. And this is an interview with a lady called Amina. She's actually a refugee, and she didn't want to be identified in her video. So we did a lot of work with her to kind of ask open questions, to build a relationship with her before we even turned on the camera. And a lot of what we were doing was trying to, like coach her to answer the questions of framing it in what the impact that the Bike Project had had on her. But hopefully, yeah, I'll just zip back to it now so you can see the film.
I came to the UK because it wasn't safe for me to be at home. When I got to London, I was put in a hotel by the Home Office, and they give you a specific document basically saying you shouldn't work until we decide on your case. So people are left in a limbo where you can't work, you can't do much. It was very heavy to see that there were so many people in need all the time. We were given £8 something a week. For me, like, I needed feminine products, for instance, like that £8 was gonna all go to that week. If one day I traveled by bus, more than 80% of my money for the week's gone. You have to get to your appointment, so I walked to a lot of places. But yeah, it made it really hard. For a lot of people, it was very isolating. After a few months of living in a hotel and not necessarily having a lot of control over my life, I ended up feeling really down and depressed. I felt like my life was out of control. I found out about the Bike Project. They teach women how to cycle, so that's how I learned to cycle. I was very excited. It's been a big goal of mine. I've always in my head just thought, like when I see someone cycling, I'm like, that looks so cool. I think it is important for refugees and asylum seekers to have bikes because it's the quickest way to get around. It's the cheapest way to get around. It helps you mentally. It's the only form of transportation that I use, to be honest. It's been a huge mental benefit. I didn't really have a lot of support system in place. So it was getting both that like physical activity, but also feeling connected to a community. And I think the Bike Project definitely does that. It helps you rebuild your life and kind of take control of it, I would say, yeah.
So I think the most important part about that film and what made it work so well is that we took a lot of time to build rapport with Mina before we even turn on the camera. So before we even got there, we spoke to her beforehand about what she was comfortable sharing and what she wasn't comfortable sharing. She'd met the person who's going to be filming her. We'd told her about, this is what the film's going to be used for. This is how long it's going to be used for. Is there anything you don't feel comfortable speaking about? So we'd built a lot of a relationship with her before we even got to the interview. And when we got to the interview, we did ask a lot of those open-ended questions. She repeated the answers back in the question. We supported her to speak about what she felt comfortable of, and she really had ownership of that interview. So it was just an opportunity for her to tell her story rather than her feeling like she was being interviewed. So just here's some tips of how you can build rapport with people when you're interviewing them. So start with small talk, just don't get into it straight away. Just, sit down, make sure they're comfortable, ask them, where would you like to sit? Where do you feel comfortable? And just ask some things about what they like doing, how their day's been. Set the tone and be warm, approachable, empathetic, and actually show interest in what they're saying. So don't just be reading your questions and your notes, be showing some interest in how they respond to things and following up with other questions, like, and encourage openness, say to them, ask them, what do you want to share? Like, do you want to tell me more about that? Obviously, you respect their boundaries, but encourage them to be open and make sure they know that this is a safe space for them to do that in. And here's another little exercise. Again, this might feel a bit awkward, but it's really helpful to just go and do as a little exercise to practice active listening. So when you're active listening, and this is really important when you're interviewing people and they're opening up about something, is that you really should give your full attention. So listen carefully, don't interrupt, let people finish what they're saying and give space at the end of questions. Don't just say, great, and move on to the next question. Say things like, oh, okay, that's really interesting, or that must have been really hard for you. Can you tell me more? Or thank you so much for sharing that. Use things that acknowledge what they've said, and it will just make people feel more confident and listened to. And there's lots of things you can do as well. You don't want to be saying like, oh yes, okay, great, while they're speaking, because that will pick up on that on the camera. So what you can do instead is just do a lot of nodding, and verbal cues, so smiling, making sure they understand that you're listening without picking it up on the camera. And then when they've finished, that's when you can say, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. Can you tell me more? Yeah, and just see how the conversation goes. And that's how it should feel. It should feel like a conversation. It shouldn't feel like they're being interviewed. It should just feel like you're having a conversation. You've got your questions there, but they're there more as a prompt. So I would always have a conversation with someone, and then I would just use my questions once we've done the sort of interview, and then say, okay, thank you. I'm just going to go back through and make sure we've covered everything. So yeah, use your questions as a guide. And obviously, when you are speaking with people who are speaking about something that could be triggering or very emotional, there can be times when it can get emotional, and that's okay. Like, it's okay that people get emotional, but there are some things that you can do in your role to just manage those situations. So first thing to do is just really stay calm and composed, and give them space and time. If they need a break, obviously you can give them a break. It's really important that you do let them, gather their thoughts without rushing them. Also, when I've interviewed people, they can get quite angry about something, and that's fine too. You can say, I understand why this is making you feel angry. Like, maybe let's just take a break and then let's go back over and talk about it. And what was it about it in particular that made you feel like that? And obviously, if they do need support, it's really important that if you are interviewing people, and it is an emotional subject, or they are vulnerable, that they are provided support, like before, during, and after the interview. So I would always sort of check in. If someone has particularly got upset, I'd check in like a few hours after the interview, just make sure they're okay, and then usually a couple of days after as well, just make sure that they're okay with everything. And this is a bit of an example of how you can ask and answer questions. So interviewer would say, I've lost my job last year and it felt like I was failing as a provider. And the interviewer could say, I imagine how challenging that must have been. Take your time. I'm here for you when you're ready to share more. So it's really like, acknowledging what they've said, saying that, that you're here for them to offer the support, and that if they're ready and want to share more, then they can. So that's another way how you can respond to things, kind of follow it up in a respectful way. And we've got some sort of common technical, some common situations that we can sort of troubleshoot here. There could be things like during your interview that there's a technical problem. So there's bad sound, there's lights, and something could crash outside. Just don't, try to be, you're the one who should be calm and in control of that situation. So just stop the interview, let them know, I'm just going to do this, or just going to let you know, like, the sound's not great, light's not great. Don't let it go on, because you're just going to then have to go and do it again. So if you notice something, just stop straight away. Obviously, let them finish their sentence and just say, I'm really sorry, we just need to pause a second. I just need to finish this and then get this sorted, then we can carry on. Nervousness, obviously, it's really normal. I think the thing that really helps that is that building rapport beforehand and creating a safe space. and just letting them know that it's okay to take their time or pause. Something I do as well, that if people are getting nervous, is I might just mix it up a bit. So just ask the question in a different way, or maybe if they are quite nervous, just sort of sat in that setting, say, let's forget this for a sec. Let's go and make a cup of tea, but carry on filming them and asking the questions. So you're getting them to do something that's a bit more natural. So you carry on asking the questions, but in a way where they feel a bit more relaxed, in a more relaxed setting. And yeah, if they give unclear answers, then you can just gently use follow-up questions, or just ask the question in a different way, or like, oh, could you explain that to me a little bit better? Or can you imagine I've known nothing about this? Like, could you just explain that to me in a more like, simple way? Yeah, and that's kind of it in terms of interviewing techniques. Obviously there's a lot more in the ethical filmmaking section as well, which I'd encourage you to go through. But I guess that, it's really important that you sort of co-create, that the power dynamics are very much there, in terms of, you recognize that you do have the power in that situation, but really you should be giving the power to the person telling their story, because it's their story and they should feel like they've got complete control over it. Always use sort of a trauma-informed approach to make sure people feel safe, and that they only share what they're comfortable in sharing, and that they're in an environment that they feel like they can do that in. And also just be authentic. Like it's really important that let people tell their full story, and even if it might not be what you want to hear, it's important that you let that authenticity come through. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for participating in this session, and looking forward to joining you for the next one.